Okay, welcome to Boundaries that we are talking about today for the holidays for keeping you in alignment. Of course, we're going to tie in human design and talk about how to create some healthy boundaries for yourself as well as for your energy so that you can stay in your signature theme as we move through the rest of the year. So, hopefully, you know me at this point, Jen Greiner, human design therapist. I am a 3-5 emotional projector. And then we are doing this currently through the alignment era. Mistral, a beautiful 4-1 emotional manifesting generator, is here with us too. So she will share some pieces on boundaries as well. Awesome. If you have questions for now, throw them in the chat. We will definitely have time at the end to do some role play or answer other questions. But if they're just short questions as we go along, definitely put them in the chat. If anything comes to mind after, you can certainly put them in the Telegram group if you're in the alignment era, or reach out to the alignment era on Instagram to ask Mistral and I questions. Okay, so hopefully you're familiar with what is human design, right? It's the system. It really tells us how we're built and how to respond to the world, including boundaries, right? Where we need boundaries, where we have some energy leaks so that we can align with our design and fulfill our purpose, especially the work that we do within the alignment era, looking at our different energetic cycles so that we can have boundaries to protect those so that we don't burn out. So just keeping in mind that there is no good or bad when it comes to human design, when it comes to boundaries. It just is this or that. And of course, your design is unique and beautiful and created specifically for you for your purpose. So keeping that in mind kind of as the goal as we move through each type and for boundaries. But first, let's talk about what are boundaries? I get this question a lot, and there's a lot to them. So, boundaries can be physical boundaries, right? When I used to work with kids, I used the hula hoop as a metaphor. I used to bring in different size hula hoops to work with the kids to say, this is my personal bubble. With some people, our bubble is really big, right? There are some people, especially with my design, that I will not let near me. I do not want you touching me. I do not want you in my aura. But there are some people that I do like, and my hula hoop is a little smaller and you can get close to me. And some people, I even toss away the hula hoop, right? It's okay if you touch me. It is okay if you hug me, right? I have different levels of physical boundaries. Then we have mental boundaries, right? How much can we mentally take on? Before we started recording, we were talking about mental boundaries. Sometimes you just need to turn your video off and be in your own space to protect your mind. Sometimes you just need to unplug and stop listening to things so that you can focus on something else. So making sure that you have mental boundaries. Mine that I've been noticing lately, like I have these rerun plays of beliefs that I don't want or old stories that are outdated. So I have mental boundaries with myself, right? This is where CBD can come in. Sorry, not CBT. Sorry. CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, to change your mental pattern so that I can focus on positivity and things that I want rather than all the negativity. Then we have emotional boundaries. We'll probably talk a lot about these today, but giving yourself space to feel your emotions, especially if you're a non emotional. How are you not letting others' emotions into you and becoming part of you and burning you out, right? When we don't have boundaries, we're going to burn out. Spiritual boundaries, right? Some people go to church every single Sunday. That is a boundary that they have. This is my protected time. This is my time to connect with God, source, however it fits into your routine. So, what boundaries do you have around your spirituality? And then there's sexual boundaries, right? Yes, they're physical, but they're a bit energetic too. Um, really benefit us. But boundaries, all in all, separate you from me in all these different capacities. They protect yourself, your self interest, and can really, when we get to the other piece, I'll talk about how I think of boundaries as a stone wall that can raise or lower, because really our boundaries are there to deflect anything external that's trying to come in and affect our energy, our lives, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. So we'll talk way more about this statement after we go through some human design, but this is a really helpful outline and template to use all the time. I feel blank when blank because blank, and I need blank. So if you can start playing around with this in preparation for the holidays, when someone really irks you at that big family party that you're stuck at for hours, you can say, I'm feeling really drained when you keep berating me for this thing because I'm a little sensitive about it and I need us to not talk about that, right? Just as one example, and we'll go through many more. So let's talk about boundaries in terms of the energy types, because each energetic type has some unique places where they can place boundaries. So just to refresh your memory about generators, manifesting generators, the doers, it's being really about the strategy of to respond when your gut gives you that hit to respond, to keep you out of frustration, right? Out of that not self and into satisfaction, right? So those being the key pieces there. So here are 3 questions. I'm going to give 3 questions for each type for you to sit with, work with. I will be sending out a guide afterwards, so don't feel like you need to write these questions down. What I'm going to give you is even better than these. But the first question, really tapping into that signature theme of satisfaction. Does this excite me? Does it light me up? Am I overgiving? What is your gut saying? Right? To really tap into that sacral and right, it's going to guide you out of frustration into satisfaction. So really tapping in and seeing what it's telling you to do, where it's guiding you, how it's instructing you to respond. And then, of course, we want to be aware of conditioning. So, am I doing this because I want to, because I have the sacral response and it's a yes, or because I'm afraid of what will happen if I don't show up, if I don't do this because of this? What is the conditioning? Are there shoulds in there, shoulding you into doing this thing that your gut is screaming no, right? We really need the boundaries there. And then lastly, for generators and mani gens, where in my life am I feeling my not self theme of frustration? Where is this coming from? And how can I say no? How can I bring myself back into that signature theme, right? Boundaries here, when we're looking at human design, it's really to keep you in your signature theme. I don't like to say it's keeping you out of your not self because there's so much to explore and learn from the not self. Mistral, anything you want to add to boundaries for manifesting generators since you are one?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is that we get so caught up in just, I know for myself, just speaking for myself as my own manifesting generator, because we all have different, centers defined and different channels that create us. But I know for me, I get so caught up as an empath with my solar plexus and emotional wave that oftentimes as a mom, as a person, and I think socially how I grew up, I often overgive because I have the energy to overgive. And even when it doesn't light me up, I will overgive, or it might light me up in the moment. And then later I'm like, ooh, this doesn't light me up, but I feel committed. And it's sometimes hard to back out of that commitment. And as I've gotten older, AKA the 40, you hit 40 and you're just like, whatever. I feel like I've definitely managed that better, but I think that's something I still personally work on is my boundaries between my kids needing something, my partner needing something, and then my friends needing something. And each of those has separate boundaries because of their relationships in my life. And so that's maybe not just a manifesting generator piece, and it's more of a human being piece of, where you are in your life. But I know for me, and my energy and the manifesting generator part is just I oftentimes have the energy and I love to help and support. And so it's really having to write out my emotional wave and let people know I can't make that decision in this moment and I need a couple days. And oftentimes people don't like it, but sometimes I'm last minute. And that's just my own personality with that. And so yes, but I definitely know, as you commented with the not self theme, is that oftentimes I will commit to something and then later I am frustrated as heck and I'm like, oh, if I backstep 10 things, I said yes to something that should have been a no. And it could be something as simple as my kids not doing something that they should have done in the moment and I let them get away with it. And then I regret that decision. So it can be something small or it could be something a lot bigger. And I think it's just recognizing that and knowing how to shift for next time.
Yeah, I love that you brought up being a manifesting generator, having so many relationships, because as a projector, I have very minimal committed relationships. I just can't do it. Usually there are like three people in my life that I text and talk to, like no more. But manifesting generators, you guys have a lot of people. You're talking to a lot of people. You are interacting with a lot of people. And especially if you're a four line, that's an alignment, right? That lights you up. But how can you do it in a way with healthy boundaries? Because I have seen so many manifesting generators put in so much energy into unaligned relationships or relationships that are draining them. So, how can you be aware to have that boundary, either to, easy for me as an Aquarius to say, detach, cut them off, be done. But I know that that's not always realistic. So, implementing boundaries to protect your energy so that you're not falling into frustration. And then the other thing I
Yeah.
want to say is that we're talking about types and what Mistral touched upon with her emotional authority. Like, please, after this, go through all these questions again in terms of your authority, right? I think all of us here now are emotional authorities. So, what boundaries do you have for your type that also support your authority, right? Riding your emotional wave, taking space, allowing yourself, like Mistral said, like, let me get back to you tomorrow, all of those things to really support your authority. All right, so next we'll talk about the manifester and manifesting generators. Remember that part of this is for you too. So for the manifester, the strategy of informing, right? Letting people know before you go initiate your big thing. And then really being aware of your spectrum of energy from your not self of anger into your signature theme, your self theme of peace. So the three questions for manifestors for boundaries. The first is, where am I forcing others into a situation? Right? Sometimes you want to initiate something, but others around you may not want to. They may also kind of be responding to your aura, right? You guys have a big, strong aura. So other people could just be like, okay, like they're almost the sheep and the manifestor is the herder. So being aware of where you may be forcing others into a situation. Also, where are you asking for permission? Right? This is kind of the opposite of forcing. Where am I asking for permission to please others? Right? Doing that people pleasing, not having boundaries, over giving, rather than initiating what what needs to be started. This really also revolves around self-trust, like trusting that you are right in what you want to initiate and doing it for you. Um, Honestly, I can't remember if it's manifestors or manifesting generators that I have this conversation with a lot that are like, oh, well, I need to do that for that person. Well, I need to do that. And it's like, but what do you want to do? And they're like, oh, well, I want to go do this. It's like, what? Why aren't you going and doing that? Right? So having that boundary to not people please and really just allow yourself to initiate what you want to do because it's going to bring you peace. And lastly, especially for pure manifestors, what parts of your life can you delegate or hand off to someone else? You are not a generator. You do not have that defined sacral, especially if you do not have other defined motor centers, heart, solar plexus, root. You may just not have the energy to do, well, you don't have the energy to do everything. You have the energy to initiate it. So afterwards, what can you delegate or hand off to someone else, even if it's cleaning the house, right? Something small can be huge for your energy. And then we have projectors. Their strategy of waiting for the invitation, waiting for that recognition, and moving from bitterness to success. And projectors, right? We still don't have that defined sacral. It's undefined, just like manifestors. So we also may not have a lot of energy, especially if you don't have the other motor centers defined, to finish things, especially if you have an undefined heart. Please accept that you are not going to follow through. Don't make promises to follow through. Your heart isn't in it, and it's okay. So 3 questions for projectors. Do I feel that I don't have an escape when someone invited me? I don't know how to say no, right? There have been so many times that I get an invitation. I'm like, oh, yes, yes. And then I'm like, shit, wait, this is actually a no, but I don't know how to say no. So I'm going to do it anyway. And in comes bitterness, right? So really remembering that you have an escape just because you get an invitation. And this is where authority comes in, right? Is it a no? Then it's a no. Where am I offering unsolicited advice? The signature part of an unaligned projector. And does this make me feel bitter and burned out? Chances are yes. And lastly, how can I recognize myself, my gifts, so that others can see and recognize me to offer an invitation? I think this can be an extremely important boundary for projectors, because if you're seeking external recognition and you don't have internal recognition, you're going to end up in bitterness. So, really starting with recognizing yourself and your gifts. And lastly, the reflector, waiting that lunar cycle, riding the energies of the moon, making sure to dump out and clear all of the energy that you've sampled throughout all of your environments, and watching out for disappointment and moving towards surprise and delight. So the 3 questions for reflectors: where am I defining myself, right? Trying to have fixed, reliable energy when it is not there, because you're trying to act like another energy type, trying to define your centers, which are undefined. Checking in with your environment. Where am I letting my environment choose or influence my decisions? That is conditioning. Where am I taking responsibility for others' energy? That is conditioning. So having those boundaries to notice what's there, but not hold on to it and not let it determine what you're going to do. And lastly, how can I communicate my need for time when making a decision? This really goes for emotional authorities as well. How can I create healthy boundaries around allowing time for decision making, right? Emotional authorities may not need a whole month, but they need time too. So having those boundaries will be very helpful. So we're not going to talk about the centers today, but I know that I saw some things in the chat about the undefined heart, right? So having that undefined heart is, I mentioned before, you're not going to follow through, right? Most likely you won't. And with 70% of the world not having a defined heart, this can be a challenge. So the heart and the solar plexus, but mostly the heart, is about boundaries. So if you have a defined heart, like I do, this is why I talk about boundaries, right? Not that I'm perfect. No, I still need to work on my boundaries often. But I know my boundaries. I can uphold them. I know that I am worthy of these boundaries. And as someone with an undefined heart or ego, that can be really hard to know that you are worthy of having these boundaries to protect yourself. Yeah, that undefined heart is really tricky. Another one too, and this is in the whole other boundaries workshop that I've done. Gate 37. Gate 37 is the gate of friendship and family. I have that channel defined as well. I'm sorry, that gate. I don't have the channel. But it's a tribal gate, a tribal channel. So it's really about knowing who can be in your close circle, who you can be friends with, who you can allow in your close knit family. So if you have gate 37, that might be easy for you, again, like it is for me. But if you don't have gate 37, that's going to be a challenge too. Someone else may have dictated who you should have in your family, right? I was told growing up, oh, well, they're your family. You need to do X, Y, and Z. Being the rebel that I am, I was like, absolutely not. Forget that. I'm going to move away so that I don't have to deal with you, right? That's how I detach and deal with things. Um, but if you don't have gate 37, that may be a helpful transit for you throughout the year. I don't know when that transit is off the top of my head. But during those 6 days, almost the week, when we're in gate 37 transit, you may more easily be able to say, ooh, I want them in my family. Or, I think I may start letting go of that person because they're not fueling me anymore. So that is all of the human design specific stuff. We'll probably tie more human design in. So let's look at the workbook that you guys have. And this has really 3 sections. This really helps you set clear boundaries and communicate with confidence for deeper and healthier relationships. You guys can read through all of this. So the first part is about emotional regulation, and I have a whole other thing about this. But emotional regulation is really focused on tuning inward, being aware what's inside you, right? Building awareness of your internal world. It also is about your nervous system, about what does safety feel like? How can you feel safe in your body? And how can you regulate, right? How can you soothe, know that you're safe, stay calm amidst the chaos, or when someone has overstepped your boundaries, or when you didn't place a boundary because you didn't know you needed it yet, or it just didn't happen and something is happening, right? So the more that you can stay emotionally regulated helps you to respond rather than react. And especially emotional authorities, when we're on the bottom of our wave, it can be really easy for us to react. So, emotional regulation, right? If you're doing meditation or anything like that, yoga, those are some really great tools that can help you develop and practice emotional regulation. Then there's actual boundaries, right? Creating that energetic and emotional clarity and boundary, right? That limit. And then lastly, the last section of this is all about communication, about how to express your needs, your limits, your boundaries, and your desires confidently. And probably most importantly, is assertively, right? There are different communication styles that are covered in here. And how can you communicate assertively, which is not aggressively, which most people think that it is? So let's tap into this. And there's lots of places to answer the questions here. So while just to be mindful of time, we probably won't give time to answer these questions, but please go back and answer these questions for yourself. So emotional regulation and emotional awareness is really the foundation. If you are not emotionally aware, if you are not aware of your internal world, none of the rest of this can happen. So it's really essential to be aware of your emotions, but also process them. And as a split definition, this takes a lot of my time, right? I have boundaries around creating space and time to process my own emotions. Because if you're demanding to have this emotional conversation in the moment and communicate and set boundaries, yet I'm not clear on what I'm even feeling, it can't happen, right? So it's also being aware of emotional triggers, right? What triggers me? I was telling Mr. All earlier, I lashed out on my grandmother yesterday, and the things that I said just flew out of my mouth. And she looks at me and is like, wait, what do you mean by that? And I was like, I don't know. And I run out of the house. And as I'm sitting in my car processing my emotions, I'm like, oh, shit, that's actually a wound that was coming out that was just reacted onto her. It has nothing to do, well, it has nothing to do with her personally, but it's conditioning. So I was emotionally triggered, but I was not regulated. So I could not respond. Whereas I took some time away, I processed my emotions, I thought about what do I need, how can I communicate this with her, and was able to respond appropriately and develop our relationship. And when we're feeling overwhelmed emotionally, right? When a lot is going on, when we haven't processed, this is where we can react. Yeah. Yeah, this is big stuff. So while I'll talk about the other stuff in this workbook, if you're kind of feeling like, oh my God, like I may need some emotional regulation, I need to be aware of my triggers and my internal world, feel free to like not go further than this, right? Really asking yourself this question all the time. How does this emotion show up in your body? And let me say, in my years as a clinical therapist, we would spend months, if not years, developing this. Like, we are not taught this, it is not ingrained within us or in our society. It is something that we have to work on and learn. So, taking your time with this is absolutely okay because we certainly don't want this to add to your emotional overwhelm. But know that by learning tools to keep yourself regulated, coming how you can approach setting boundaries is a heck of a lot different, right? It can really be from a place of calm, clarity, and self assurance. And again, tying human design in, right? Honoring your strategy and authority, understanding your design and your energy sets you up for success here. And also that human design gives you a roadmap, right, of what you may be experiencing internally. So just noticing what is showing up in your body, what emotions are there, naming
Could
them.
I add,
Oh, yeah.
Jen? Sorry. I just think as you were talking, I was sort of thinking about like my own emotional regulation and especially with like kids and someone who works with kids daily, but then like having kids, I feel like kids push our emotional boundaries so quickly and so hard. And you can like Bridget's like, yeah. Um, because I feel like you can like be emotionally regulated and you can be asking them to do something and be like, okay, please do this, please do this, please do this. Okay, I need my space. I've asked you not to do that, whatever it is that they're doing. And then you kind of get to a point where like they just keep going and then you like explode, right? And so I think that's also something to be aware of and give yourself grace around is like sometimes you are emotionally regulated, but there's little people in your life or bigger people because they're still your kids no matter how big they are and they still push your buttons how big no matter how big they are who just don't know how to honor a boundary themselves yet. And so either don't care or don't understand or don't realize. And whereas an adult, when you're asking for space or whatever, will recognize that. And but kids won't. So I just wanted to put that in there too, because I think sometimes as parents, we're just like, I feel so emotionally unregulated all the time because of my children.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for covering this right here, Mr. All, because right, kids are an emotional trigger. Your partner may be an emotional trigger, right? Work sometimes. We're in Mercury retrograde. Mercury retrograde can give its triggers. So knowing those triggers, and especially with kids, right? There's no getting rid of them. They're always going to be there and be the potential of triggering. So when I would work with kids, before I went into the house, I would sit in my car and I would breathe and be like, all right, we're going into chaos. We're going into these kids. I need to, be professional. I'm not going to yell at these kids. I would take deep breaths. I would tune inward. I would do any grounding practices or anything that I needed to so that I would not be triggered emotionally. And I know it's not that easy when they live in your house and you're with them all the time and depending on their ages, but having some things that you can do beforehand, knowing that those triggers could and likely will come, so that you can practice staying regulated in those moments. Because I cannot stress this enough of practicing your regulation strategies, practicing your coping skills, because you can practice them every single day and be like, I got it. I'm good. But in the situation when you need them and you're like, I've been practicing this every day. Why is this not working? Why is it not regulating me? Right? It's so hard in the moment. So definitely giving yourself some grace, some compassion that this is like really, really tough stuff. And it sucks that we're not, instructed to do this in life. Oh, yes, Bridget. We'll get to those different viewpoints, right? It's not even kids doing the things, right? It could be a family member that you have to sit next to at Thanksgiving that says the one thing that you're just like, how do I not bop them on the head? So we'll get there. So some tips that I like to recommend are breath work, especially if you're a mountains environment, definitely trying some breath work. We'll talk about later in here, stop, breathe, reflect, choose, and journaling, right? Self-reflection. Um, so yeah, just really staying aware of what emotion is there, right? Like anger, I always describe as like one of those rubber band balls. It is so many emotions jumbled together, and you have to start to pick it apart to see what's actually underneath the anger. And fear. Fear is a pesky, pesky thing that can infiltrate into everything. And most issues, the very underlying issue is the fear of not being loved. So that can always be something to stay aware of. So this page just goes over the difference between reacting and responding, really knowing the difference and starting to know the difference within you, right? You can be instant, quick reaction with no thought. It just comes out, right? That's what happened to me yesterday with my grandma. It just came out as the reaction. Just tying in human design, right? That could be the gut reaction in the moment. It could be the fears that you've been conditioned that are being held onto in the spleen. Emotional authorities, especially with tribal wave, that can be your ratchet, that it's all just going to come out. Or if the collective wave, you're on that drop, right? That can kind of predispose us to react. But really, what we want to do is respond. It's thought out, it's intentional. You're tapping into your throat center, how it works for you. And this may take time. I am no expert in responding in my own personal life. Professionally, yes, do it very well, do it all the time, help coach people. But this takes time, right? With split definition, emotional authority, with any split definition, triple split, quadruple split, it's going to take some time. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, right? So overwhelm is a huge indicator of needing space, of needing processing time. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, that may be a key thing to know, okay, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I need a boundary, and my boundary for overwhelm is this, right? That sentence that I plugged in before that'll be just in a couple of pages. I feel overwhelmed when blank, whatever it is for you, and I need to take space away. I need that boundary. So thinking about what helps you respond, because that's going to be a helpful boundary. Okay. So here is this stop, breathe, reflect, choose. For any generators and manifesting generators, any sacral, you guys need to practice this all the time because you get so excited that you just want to go do it. But everybody can really benefit from stopping, right? Just stopping, taking a pause, taking a breath that helps regulate you, breathing into your belly and audibly exhaling can really help soothe the nervous system, soften a little. I love to use the excuse to go to the bathroom. I don't have to go to the bathroom, but I'm sure going to go in that room by myself and take some really deep breaths, right? The I need to go to the bathroom is kind of the stop. I breathe in the bathroom and I reflect. What do I need to remember? Where is this emotion coming from? Where am I on my emotional wave? Can I change something? Can I change how I see myself in this situation? How do I want to respond? Right? All the reflection that can happen so that you can consciously choose, right? From your wise mind. I believe that's in here on another page, but really choosing what is possible here. What will serve my greater good? What will keep me? What will put me in that signature theme? What is my best option, right? They may all be not great options, but choosing the best one and the one that's going to lead you the most into alignment. And any other tools that you have. I mean, fill up that toolbox. Have that toolbox be overflowing of things that help you ground and respond. Because emotional regulation is not about perfection, right? Nobody is perfect. And this is something that, like, please do not strive for perfection. Not going to help. But it's about creating enough internal space to be aware, to understand yourself, and respond rather than react. And doing it compassionately, bringing compassion and awareness to your emotions, how they live in your body, so that you can build this foundation, right? You have to have that foundation first for healthy boundaries and empowered communication, right? We can't go further in these sections until you really feel good, not perfect, right? Until you start to be aware of this. Definitely feel free to read through the rest of this, because when you're ready to regulate emotions, we can go to this next phase. And really, I want you all to think about who can you talk to about this, because this is something, especially for you defined throats, especially for that manifester, like you guys need to talk about this. And if you're sure, talk about it to yourself, but you really need someone else. Like we've been talking about the internal, but we're going to move into more of the interpersonal. So having someone that you can vent to, right? Or say, how did that sound? Like, who can you ask for feedback for? Or role play, right? I used to role play with my clients all the time because I was the person that they could vent to, that they could dump their emotions onto, that they could say, what do I need to do? How does this sound? What's another way? So please make sure that you have at least one person like that in your life, because this is not easy, right? It's heavy shit. So, before we talk about boundaries, anything, Mistral, anything you want to add? Anybody else, drop your questions in the chat about emotional regulation. I know it's a lot, but we can't do the rest without that. So, all right, let's talk about boundaries. This is, of course, one of my favorite things to talk about. So, once you feel good about your emotional awareness, let's talk about boundaries. So, as I mentioned before, boundaries are all types, right? There's external boundaries, there's self boundaries, but really, all in all, they are an act of self respect. They clarify where you end and another begins, right? That is discernment, using discernment. So, identifying your own personal boundaries is the first step towards creating clarity and emotional safety in your relationships. because you can't set a boundary if you don't know what you need, right? Boundaries are based on needs. So this section helps us pinpoint areas of our lives where we are feeling overwhelmed, drained, even disrespected. So we'll talk about recognizing the signs that indicate a boundary is needed and allowing you to take that step to regain your power. So one question to think about that is, where do you abandon yourself to keep the peace, right? That is people pleasing. That is not listening to your sacral or your authority or all of the other signs and symptoms that your body may be screaming at you to let you know that you are abandoning yourself. Because we can't always keep the peace. I know we want to. Okay. So when we talk about boundaries, feel free, like this is your own language. You guys are creating your own language. So I'm going to use mine, but feel free to make your own. So when we talk about boundaries, you might say limits, rules, comfort zone, mine versus theirs, inner versus outer, whatever word you like, especially if you don't like the word boundary. But like I mentioned before, I think of boundaries like a stone wall that lift and lowers as to how firm you need it to be, right? So sometimes the wall might be lower. People might step over. It's like, yeah, I need this, but like maybe it's more of a want. So I'm going to put that boundary there, but like it's maybe it's there for me, right? Maybe I'm just saying it to someone else for me. But then sometimes that wall can heighten, right? Maybe it's 6 feet, so like the deer can still hop over, but maybe it needs to be 10, 12, 20, 30 feet because that is such a firm boundary that you are not letting a single thing over that, right? So asking yourself if you're okay with someone stepping over your boundary. Is this a limit that you need to keep in place to protect your energy? Or is it a limit that you'd like to have, especially if you're a 3 line, right? I have a lot of lower rock walls because I'm like, do I need a higher boundary? I don't know yet. Let's fuck around and find out. And usually the answer is yes, I need more of a boundary. Or is this you do need it and you do not want anyone to cross that boundary? So, to simplify it, right, we've kind of talked about this, the internal boundaries, how you respond to your thoughts and needs. And Mistral just put into the chat that people pleasing is like a silent, hidden boundary. And yes, yes, it is. People pleasing, while a lot of people think of it as an external boundary, right, because it's someone else, people pleasing is really an internal boundary. You are the one in charge of people pleasing. So I love that she called it a silent hidden boundary because it's often passed on from our parents, from other adults, from society, the work ethic, how they showed up for others, and the expectation they put on us as children. I've been noticing this myself, especially being with family for the past 2 weeks. My core genetic wound is guilt, and I see how that comes from generations. That if I don't people please, I am guilty of being a terrible person. That's not true. It's not true. But it is that silent, hidden conditioning within us where I need that boundary, this internal boundary within myself, that I'm not guilty of anything. Um, and yeah, just how times are changing, and especially as all of you with kids as they start to get older, right? We start to see the difference in the generations, right? I'm on the younger end, so I can see it with higher generations of why are you working? It's Sunday. I have time and energy. Of course I'm gonna work because it's got to get done. And just because it's Monday at 5 o'clock, like doesn't mean that I stop working, you know? So little things like that we've been told, but really we create our own internal boundaries. So for the purpose of today, I would encourage you guys to think about, do you need more internal boundaries with yourself, how you respond to your thoughts and needs, like people pleasing? Or are you needing more external boundaries, how you communicate with others, right? Upcoming family holidays, parties, things like that? Are you worried that, that political supporter who's sitting next to you is going to say some things that may set you off and you want to communicate effectively? Yeah, so let me just say, most boundaries are internal, right? But there are ones that we need to cultivate internally and express externally because really we need boundaries everywhere. Relationships, situations, work, family, friends, like literally everywhere. So another helpful thing to ask yourself is, where are you not feeling respected? Because that can help guide you. Yeah. So all the emotions that we can feel when we don't set boundaries versus when we do set healthy boundaries, we can feel better, we can feel in control. Ultimately, we feel in our signature theme. So again, know that this takes practice. We have to face the fear to move out this growth zone with the fears. It can be really helpful just as a visual. So once you've thought about internal or external, think about, are these emotional boundaries, mental, physical boundaries? What subtype of boundaries are you needing there? And again, this just kind of walks you through like what you're feeling and how you can shift that. What boundary do you wish you had set in the moment, right? Sometimes it can be helpful to think of past experiences or interactions so that you can see how would you have set or how could you have set a boundary there for yourself or communicated it. And trust that discomfort is a clue. Like, this is not going to be comfortable, but again, you have to kind of push through that discomfort to get to that next step. So, if you are aware of your boundary, feel free to drop it in the chat. Hopefully, we'll have a little time for role playing too, because I love doing that. But let's talk a little bit about communication, because I also love talking about this. Because communication is the bridge between your inner clarity, right? What you've cultivated, what you've identified you need, how you're feeling, and your outer relationships. Even though most communication happens non-verbally, we still, especially in Mercury retrograde, need to communicate externally effectively. It only becomes easeful when it's rooted in emotional awareness and firm boundaries. So really use your voice, especially if you are an auditory authority, self-projected or mental, that you're really using your voice. So important. Yes. The bridge between inner clarity and your external. Once your emotions are in check, right? You're regulated. Now, this is personally my hardest part, is to speak your truth. An undefined throat. It is so hard to speak my truth, but this is how we're going to do it. Great question of how you know if you're auditory. So you would have a channel from your mind to your throat, right? That would be needing to express your thoughts. If your G center has a channel up to your throat, that would be expressing your truth. I would say those are the main auditory, but if you do have the money channel from the throat to the heart, right, well, that would give you a whole different power. So we'd be having a whole different conversation if you had that channel, because that is a powerful thing to have in all of this. But if your emotional wave is from your solar plexus to your throat, especially if you have the 3536 channel, you need to be expressing your emotions verbally, right? The voice of gate 35 is I feel. So you need to be speaking. And even if you just have gate 35, right? I feel this, right? That statement can be really helpful. There's a whole, if you're curious about other auditory aspects, I did a whole Instagram live about it. So can certainly share that. But yeah, with what we're talking about communication, like it really comes down to your throat center. So I don't know what month we're doing the throat center in a few months. We'll do this inside the alignment era, and we can definitely tie all this in. But some common mistakes that can happen, and these can absolutely happen with the undefined throats or, defined throats. Sorry, you are not immune to this. It could be ingrained conditioning. So being aware of if you're over explaining, apologizing, being passive or indirect, these are some mistakes that can hold you back from communicating your boundary. So, three key principles to state your boundaries is clarity. Be direct, no jargon, no fluff. I know it's hard, but no need to make excuses or prefaces. Just clearly state this is what it is. Because that brevity, that short and to the point, can make it be more impactful. Whereas if you put a lot of the fluff in there, sometimes that's all that's heard. And we're going to talk way more about this neutrality because using neutral language can help not escalate the situation. One of the key things to do in the neutrality here is don't use the word you. It is extremely difficult, and typically I use multiple sessions to role play this with clients because it is so hard to not use the word you. But there is another way, and I promise you that you can get around it. And that's why writing these out can be helpful practice. So these are the 4 types of communication. First is passive, right? Chances are you have a passive female in your family because they are prevalent. They avoid conflict at all costs. They keep the peace. I don't mind. Whatever you want. It's fine. That's all passive. There tends to be a level of anxiety that can come out here because they're not speaking up. They don't want to rock the boat, right? Then the complete opposite of passive is aggressive. And these tend to be more male dominated, right? They're controlling through this dominance, the aggressive, the communication. It expresses their needs. It states control, demanding. It may be overpowering. It may feel very dismissive. It can feel forceful. It may be loud or intense. It may evoke anxiety within someone else because you feel attacked or unsafe. So it may get what they want in the short term, right? Being aggressive, they might get passivity there, but it damages trust and emotional connections. Like this is not a helpful form of communication at all. And I assume that all of you can relate to this. Maybe not in your family, but maybe a past partner, maybe someone you interacted with, right? These were like the bullies in school. They come up and they're aggressive. You always blah, blah, blah. If you don't do this, then blah, 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 right? Those ultimatums, that's all aggressive communication. And then there's passive aggressive, right? I assume you all know someone who is passive aggressive. Oh, an ex of parents, the things that they used to say, I was just like, that is so passive aggressive. You're coming off passive, but you're everything that you're not saying is so cruel and hurtful, even though it's not directly said, because it's indirect. There's an anger, there's a tone there that hides through sarcasm. There's a lot of guilt tripping, right? Those backhanded comments. This is a way to express anger, unmet needs without actually doing it. So many people think that this is an effective form of communication, but it is not. It's confusing. It's alienating, right? So some common phrases are, yeah, sure, whatever, right? When really it should be no. I guess I'll just do it myself again. I say that all the time. So we're not all just one. We flip back and forth. But ultimately, what we want to be is assertive. But to be assertive takes emotional regulation and awareness of boundaries and practice because communication is difficult. So let's talk about what assertive communication is because many people don't know about this. And I think I put somewhere in here in a phenomenal book. It's my favorite book, and I have lost so many to clients who have just kept it, but that's okay. Because assertive is not passive and it is not aggressive. Many people think assertive communication is aggressive, and it is not. And it certainly is not passive aggressive. It is honest, it is clear, it is self respecting, and it is respectful. This expresses your needs, your feelings, and boundaries openly with respect. That's the goal. Healthy connection, it develops trust, it can repair a lot of things, right? We all have arguments. There's going to be conflict. Sorry, non emotionals, but it's there. You're going to have to do it, but you can always repair, right? The examples that Mistral and I have said when we've yelled at people, right? We're going to go and we're going to repair those relationships through assertive communication. And this is not about being perfect. It's just being grounded, knowing your truth without pushing, without forcing, without shrinking, without that passivity. So I feel really upset when you yell at me, and I need us to have a calm conversation, right? Or saying, this isn't okay with me, and here's what I need instead, right? Some people do hear this as aggressive, but this is assertive. You are clearly stating what you need, right? It's really the sweet spot combining truth, respect, and emotional safety. So this is just another way of looking at these styles, an underlying core beliefs, some common behaviors, and the impact it has on relationships. So again, here is this outline. It helps you feel heard. Use stop, breathe, reflect, choose, because after you choose what to do next, you can use this strategy to effectively communicate how you're feeling, your wants, needs, boundaries. The amount of times that I have written this out with clients so that we can edit it, we can make sure it's not aggressive, that it is respectful, that it's going to be heard and received. So remember, using the word you, it's hit or miss. So a safe bet is to try to take it out and be assertive. So here are some examples, and feel free, if you have your own, please pop it in the chat. Maybe you can think of a situation that you're in right now where this outline template can help you to voice that, and we can absolutely go through some of these. So I feel frustrated when plans change last minute. I need more advance notice to feel grounded, right? Sometimes you can cut out when and because, but try to do it all, especially for practice. I feel upset when there's no follow through because it disappoints me and brings up abandonment wounds. I need to be able to trust what is said to me, right? There is no you in that. This is about me. This is about communicating my internal so that the communication is that bridge, right, between the internal clarity and the external needs, the boundaries. So when you finish it off with I need, that's your boundary, right? In everyday speak, we're not saying I'm going to set the boundary of this, that, and the other thing. With kids, maybe you do, and you're modeling healthy boundaries and how to communicate them. But chances are that the word boundary may not be in your daily vocabulary. So before we talk about this, anything around boundaries, around communication that we've talked about thus far?
I like the way, Jen, you talked about how we oftentimes can flip back and forth between like being passive aggressive or being assertive, because I think it reminds us that we're human and we're not always going to be perfect, right? And we've, as humans, have been modeled certain things from our parents or other people in our lives that we've taken on as our own at different times. And so recognizing, but I think it comes back to like recognizing it, right? Like how you talked about when you yelled at your grandmother and then you went and took a breather and then you're like, ooh, that's where that came from. Same thing with me yesterday. I yelled at my children because after asking them 5 million times to get out of the kitchen, stop doing X, Y, and Z, whatever that it was, I had to yell because that's the only way that they would listen. And I talked to them about that afterwards, and we went through how each of us were feeling. And so I think it's that repair that you were talking about that is so important, and to just like honor that as being human beings, there's no way we can be perfect all the time because there's so many different triggers and people trigger us in different ways. And there's situations where we have bosses that we're working for that trigger us. There's situations we have colleagues or clients that will trigger us in certain ways. And then just how to like reset those boundaries if we feel that we failed ourselves in setting them correctly the first time, and just like understanding that we can make those choices in the future again. And then what did I say at the start? Just like recognizing that and being able to acknowledge it in our own presence.
Yeah, self-awareness is imperative.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
Do you ever think that sometimes like we just have to fucking scream? Like,
To just get it out.
yeah, like I mean, honestly, sometimes like the doing and saying all the things, and then like when I blow up sometimes at my kids, it's finally that point that they're like they get it. And then like for the next few days, like they'll they'll you know, step up to the plate a little bit. And although I don't like it getting to that point, sometimes I'm like, wow, like maybe that I just have to, I don't know. But sometimes I feel like you have to yell. Not all the time. Definitely not all the time, but sometimes.
I think I think it's good for kids to recognize in you when they've hit that, like in a safe zone, right? Mom's a safe zone. And when mom explodes, they know that regardless of what happened, you're always going to be accepting and open and bring them back in, right? Because you've created that safe boundary with them already, which is why they feel comfortable challenging our boundaries, right? And so there's that piece I think that is really important to acknowledge. But I know, like for me, I never feel good after yelling. And that just might be my own personal way that I feel around things, whether that was from my own upbringing or just something in my human design chart. I never feel good, and it didn't feel, and even after like we talked about it, I still just didn't feel good. And my kids don't listen, so there is no like improvement, but they are younger, Bridget. And so I'm not trying to say like what you said is incorrect or anything. So don't take it that way, please. I just know in my personal, the way I show up in things, it never feels good to me. And I physically hate getting to that point because I feel out of control when I'm yelling. I feel like I've hit like a brink where I'm like no longer in control of like what I'm saying, what's coming out of my mouth. I oftentimes completely regret what I've said, which is a part of the restorative conversation I end up having with my children and explaining like why it got to that point. Um, but I do think there is a part of like what you're saying. It's like an energetic release, right? So it's like a release. And I think that's a piece of like somatic work where there would be a lot of people who would agree that like the somatics of like releasing that energy is like huge and probably really good. And I think everyone is going to react and feel that differently. Um, so
Yeah, I agree with you halfway. Like I both ways. Actually, I agree the whole thing, but it's like I don't feel good when I do it. Um, I don't feel good at the yeah, that it had to get to that point. But definitely the screaming, like I definitely feel a release
yeah,
that feels fucking incredible. And it's like, wow, holy shit, I really just roared like that. And like, not only that, I mean, they weren't scared for their lives, but like there was a bit of like, holy fuck, she has this kind of energy. And I'm like, that's just the tip of it, you know? And not in this, you know what I mean? I love like my kids and I, we definitely have the part after where we, you know, we'll go into the rooms, whatever, and like usually all the time for me, but I apologize, you know, I'm like, you know what? I apologize. And I don't do the but I just say I apologize. And what led me to that, you know, I said this isn't an excuse. You know, it's not the but definitely um, feeling that release is really powerful.
Yes. Yeah. And I would agree with that because yeah, I felt out of control yesterday. So maybe that was just like my experience that I'm relating to right now from yesterday versus like another time when it maybe felt good to like get that out. But I also loved how you said, and I just did it myself. I said, but how you said, instead of saying but, you said and I think that that's a really that's just like tiny change in the language and how we do it because I feel like the but feels accusational when we're talking with our kids or to anybody else, whereas the and sort of says, I felt this, da 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 da, and this is
Mhm.
how the reaction occurred. I feel like that feels more assertive than like I feel like but can be so passive aggressive.
Yep. Yeah, that's like it. I learned a lot of my language just from, not doing what my mom did to me. Um, and like I put up yesterday, like my daughter just won vice president of her school. Like, and it's huge. Like she's in a big school, like it's awesome. I'm really proud. She's kind of humble about like she won't, she doesn't tell everybody, oh, I just, you know what I mean? She told me, and then my parents like, why didn't she say anything? And I was like, anyhow, my mom like messages me and she's like, well, I just said, hey, McKenna, one vice president. And right away I was like, she's going to tell me to do something. This is my mom. She's going to tell me, that's nice, but, you know, like something else. And then she'd be like, yeah. And you know what? You should. Should. It's always my mom. I always should do this. I should do more. I should do this. And I was like, it's all right. She's never going to change, Bridget. Just don't respond.
And that's the boundary that you set, which is beautiful because it's like in the past, maybe you would have jumped and done something about it, whereas now you're just like, right? And maybe you never would have jumped. I don't know about your past, but like how good of you.
I would have reacted and been like, I shouldn't have to do any fucking more than I'm already doing. I shouldn't have to do jack fucking shit. And that's what and like, I react and I, yell back. But like now I just write back, thank you. I love you.
Beautiful.
Thanks. Cool. Not going to do it.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, she got me a book on how to raise a kid last year. I was like, really? Or like, oh no, it's called Grown and Flown, What to Do When They Leave the House. And I was like,
Oh,
girl, my daughter there is nobody more ready than to fly this coop.
yeah.
Like she is on her way. And like, and my mom's like, I didn't buy this to tell you what to do. And I was like, I don't know about that. I threw the book away. It was weird because my mom's gotten me great books since I was a kid, like poetry, like little things that I love. My mom would write her this book, the sidewalk where the sidewalk ends. That was like my favorite book as a kid. And she writes this, and then she writes in the book she gave me. She wrote this one for me for my, the Grown and Flown, and it took me a few. I held on to the book. I'm like, do I throw this away? Am I going to feel bad when she dies that I threw away the book that she wrote in? And I was like, nope, I threw it away. Not at all. No,
Uh,
I have the other books that I liked. I don't need this shit.
so I think you guys are talking about two other big pieces here, and thank you for bringing it up. I think one is that it can be really helpful to identify other people's communication styles, right? You're talking about how other people are passive aggressive so that you can understand how they communicate, right? Perhaps how they'll respond or how you may need to set boundaries to kind of not adhere, but be ready for that communication style. And I think another big point about these boundaries is that by setting these boundaries, by choosing to do something differently, you are breaking patterns. You're not only breaking patterns within yourself, but with what you guys were just talking about, you're also breaking generational patterns, right? So that you're not continuing to do things that were done generations before that you either see, I don't want to do that, right? I don't want to continue those patterns, or you're setting yourself and future generations up for success by not continuing to give in and repeat those patterns. So by saying no, either literally or energetically, right? By Bridget just saying, thank you, I love you, right? She's really saying no. No, I'm not giving in to your communication. No, I cannot fight with you right now. No, I'm not going to continue this pattern. So, yeah, just being aware of the patterns that you don't want to continue and how there are probably a million different ways to say no, right? That's why my motto is there's another way. Because when I walk through this with clients, they're like, oh my God, I never thought of that. I'm like, yeah, because we can't all on our own. And especially if you have a defined mind, if your ajna is defined, you have blinders on. Like it can be very near impossible for you to think outside the box and see another way. So again, that's why it's so important to have at least one other person that you can bounce these things off of, because they're going to see a different perspective. They're going to give you words that maybe you don't have, right? Especially if your defined throat is using the words that work for you, it might be hard to kind of go out of that. So practice, 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 practice. I can't say it enough. Practice with yourself. Practice it when you go to the grocery store. Practice it anywhere and everywhere. Like this has to be practiced. Can't expect results overnight. So the next part of this, if we're ready for it, is holding the boundary, even when it's hard. Because setting the boundary is just the beginning, right? You've done all this work. You've been emotionally regulated. You've looked at what boundaries need. You've communicated the boundary. You've worked so hard to write it out and assertively communicate the boundary. I'm sorry to say, it's so far from over. Like you're about halfway there, because the toughest part is this next half that is holding the boundary, upholding your boundaries. When mom keeps shoulding you, when the passive aggression continues coming at you, when you lower that rock wall, because it will be a hell of a lot easier. But when you keep upholding these boundaries, that's where the real transformation happens. That's where you're going to feel respected. You're going to live more in your signature theme. Like it's going to feel so good. Oh, I love like congratulating myself every time I set a boundary and uphold it and get to go do my own thing. Right? It's like manifestors. When you say, okay, I've informed you, I've set the boundary because now I'm going to go initiate. Right? And Manny Gens, you can do that too. So this next part is really about maintaining your boundaries, because they are going to be challenged. They are going to be walked over, because chances are your first boundary setting, that rock wall, was not high enough. And as we know, people can rock climb, so they may climb up over your boundary. So there will be resistance. There will be guilt. There will be discomfort, a lot of emotional discomfort. We become empowered when you become empowered to stand firm in your decision, right? That's why that second part about the boundaries is so important, because you really have to choose that you need this boundary so that you're committed to it. When you stand firm in that, you'll stop second guessing yourself. Your mind won't, give in to the shoulds. Do I really need this? Do I not? No, I need to stay in my signature theme. I have determined and decided with your authority that I need this boundary. So I have already said it, but I'm going to keep holding it. So yeah, just being aware of the emotions that come up, that fear, the guilt, fear of judgment, especially depending on what gates you have in your spleen, right? That's where our deep-seated fears lie. Either yours that are in your energy, the gates that you have defined in your spleen that are out of alignment, that are in that shadow, and really the gates that are undefined, that you are holding on to those fears because of conditioning, because of experiences that have reinforced those fears for you. So it's helpful to be aware of those. And again, thinking about the past, right? Where did you set a boundary, but you didn't uphold it and you let that boundary slide? And chances are you fell into that not self theme. So using that as an example, how you can show up for yourself differently. So just some tips for reinforcement. Like, you are going to repeat yourself. I hate repeating myself, but when it comes to boundaries, it's like, all right, here we go again. It's practice, right? You're practicing it again. Responding with neutrality, having these go-to statements can be really helpful. I understand this is hard, but I need to stick to that boundary, right? Especially when you're talking to your kids. I know this is difficult, but we need to stick to this. We're going to keep working on it. Also, knowing when to walk away. Because if your boundary isn't respected, it's okay to walk away from the conversation and reestablish when you're ready. If I don't have LinkedIn here, I'm going to put LinkedIn here. I have a great resource. It's called Fair Fighting Rules. This is from so long ago when I first started the work. It was right after I graduated grad school. But these fair fighting rules are so helpful for every relationship. So going over them together with your family, with your partner, whoever it is, to read through those fair fighting rules so that everybody can be on the same page that it is okay to walk away. So again, tapping into how it feels, right? What is the emotional clarity internally? How did it feel to reinforce the boundary? You probably rolled your eyes, but did you stay emotionally regulated, right? Did you communicate it in a way that felt good? Were you grounded and connected to yourself? So just a couple of examples, because they're always helpful, of ineffective communication. We said this before. I'm sorry, but I need some space. It's just that I'm feeling overwhelmed and I need time to recharge, right? Oh, you may look at this statement and say, "Oh, that's good." Right? Chances are we all say that. I'm sorry, but I need some space. I'm just feeling overwhelmed and I need time to recharge. But changing that into effective communication, right? And again, this is what I do so much with clients. I need space right now to recharge and will reach out when I'm ready to connect. Right? Do you hear and feel the difference in those two? The second one is there is no wiggle room. There's no people pleasing. This is what I need. And I'm setting the boundary that I will reach out when I'm ready. Right? So the biggest piece that I have not said in here yet, and I feel like I need to add that in here, is you are not responsible for other people's emotions. Right? And this is why my whole new offer, the Emotional Sovereignty Starter Kit, talks about this, because understanding the dynamics of the solar plexus, because as emotionals, we have our own wave. But chances are you're communicating with others that feel attacked. They're fearful of conflict. They avoid conflict at all costs. But here you come in and they're going to be really emotional, right? They may regress. They may kind of turn back into a child. Yes, it could be victim mentality, but they're trying to, in a way, emotionally manipulate you into overriding your boundaries to cater to them. They're trying to guilt you into saying, pick me, pick me. Don't pick you. Don't have this boundary. I need this. I need. Right? So that's why it's so important for you to effectively communicate your boundaries. And if they don't listen, then you either restate it as much as you feel, or, for this example here, I would say, like I said, I'll reach out when I'm ready to connect. And if they keep berating me, they're blocked. Like, no, you have infiltrated my energetic sphere, and that cannot happen. Yep. So detachment can be really helpful here, but ultimately knowing that you are not responsible for anybody else's emotions, right? Overriding that is people pleasing, and it's so hard. It's so hard. So this is just a page of tapping into feels, right? How does it feel? I know you guys discussed feeling that not self theme, feeling the frustration, the bitterness, the anger, the disappointment when your boundaries are overridden or someone's not communicating effectively or they don't hear what you're saying, right? But this is, again, all about you. Like, be selfish here because boundaries are for you. So when you create the boundary, when you state the boundary, how do you feel after? Like, I hope you're feeling really proud of yourself, right? You're feeling satisfied, successful, peaceful, delighted because you set that boundary. You voiced your needs. You're feeling good. Like, that is something to be celebrated because it is so difficult. So after you do it, right? After you do it once, tapping into like what did I learn? Do I need to do more of this? What boundaries? Like go on a boundaries like tour, you know, tap into all the boundaries so that you can keep practicing communicating effectively moving forward. And again, the support system, like I just can't say it enough. Friends, family, therapists, coaches to help guide you through this and especially when your boundaries are not upheld, right? That's when it's going to be toughest. Um, so this is more just checking stuff. I just wanted to see, no. Okay. So I'm going to add those resources in here with the fair fighting rules because I did not put them in here. But there's a lot of integration, right, into this. And it's not a one-time fix. It's ongoing practice. But I will say it does get easier. I promise. Like it's really hard at first and it's not easy. That's why having someone else, your support systems, all of those aspects can really help you through this. So, any questions? Any pieces to explore? I know we're just at the end of the 90 minutes here, but we have Telegram, so definitely drop things into Telegram. Um, but I'm happy to answer any other questions if anything else has come up.
I have one quick question. What if after you state the boundaries, someone blows up and then you you separate, you know, you have the boundary, you separate, and then it just goes back. Nobody talks after. And the only way, so that's like the cycle of my family is like, uh, stay quiet, stay quiet, stay quiet. I blow the F up at them after, the boundaries separate. We don't talk for months, months. And then it's like, my mom does the thing where she buys things to, and then I feel bad. So I'm like, okay. And I also feel bad, like, oh my gosh, if she dies, I'm going to feel horrible. You know, it's just normal. I think it's human. But then there's no talk, of what happened.
I mean, really, it would be checking in internally. What do you want? Do you want to talk about it? Do you need to talk about it? Do you need to set new boundaries? Do you need to set new rules?
I
One,
don't feel like that's my responsibility, you know?
if that's what you need. It is your responsibility because you are the only one who can do it. Otherwise, you're just continuing the cycle, you're continuing the pattern, and nothing's going to change. You got to throw a wrench in it to stop it. And will it stop and change everything? Probably not. But for you to say, in order to continue communicating, I need to voice this, or I need us to follow these rules. I need for us to read through the fair fighting rules. You know,
Got it.
ultimately, it's what you need, and tapping into your strategy and authority, what brings you satisfaction, and all of that.
And just one thing I wanted to add, Bridget, just because I heard you say, like, and I might have interpreted this wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong, but you said, I let it slide, I let it slide, I let it slide, or I kind of ignore it. And then the explosion happens. So I think it's like, don't let it slide, like, state your boundary. And then the next time it happens, state your boundary. And the next time it happens, state your boundary. And I know this from myself because I was one of those people that like let it slide with coworkers in particular. And then there would be like a big explosion where we're both kind of almost in like the same role, but different areas. And we were always competing against each other. And then it would be this big explosion. And I learned very quickly if I'm going to be in this leadership role, I have to start stating those boundaries. Right. And so like then I noticed, and I noticed when I put this with my mother-in-law too, same thing. I'd let things slide because she was my mother-in-law, blah, 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 blah. And then once my kids were born, I like didn't want those things to slide anymore. And so I stated them in the moment. And now we have such a better relationship. She's very passive aggressive. I kind of call her out on it without saying you're passive aggressive, but we'll call her out on her little things to state my boundary, and our relationship is so much better because of it. But it was not there when I just let things slide, and then just complained to my husband, which never really went over well because it's his mom and,
Right.
all of those things. And there's that boundary. And so, I just have found that like instead of letting it slide, I just state a boundary. And I try to do it in a way that's not like, because with my dad, I do it with my dad too. I'm just like, Dad, that's ridiculous was what I used to do, but then that never goes over well because he feels bad. So I had to shift, right? My like language for how I would like set my boundary or whatever. And same thing now, my dad like doesn't say those stupid things anymore that used to really irritate me that I would just let slide, because when I let it slide, it's telling them that it's okay to treat
Yeah.
me that way or to say those things or to whatever. And so I think coming back to like, don't let it slide and hold your boundary in that moment. And each little of those steps will prevent the potential explosion. And it might cause little rifts that you're kind of avoiding, right? It's that people pleasing, you're avoiding it. You're not setting the boundary. Or you're like, it's so small, it doesn't matter, but it does, right? Because it leads to the bigger piece.
Yeah.